Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Charity Charge Nonprofit Spotlight Series. My name is Matt, and at Charity Charge, our mission is to power yours. Outside of this podcast and blog series, we do that through equitable access to financial tools and services such as our credit card and gift card programs. If any of that sounds like it would be helpful to your organization, please do reach out to us. We are here for you. And today on the Spotlight series, I'm very excited to chat with Jonathan Agan, who is an attorney, fractional chief legal officer over at Metabolic Terrain Institute of Health, as well as the executive director of Prep for Gold. Jonathan, thank you for being with us today. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Very excited to chat with you about your work with Prep for Gold. And before, getting into the mission of that organization, you've had a wonderful career as an advocate and leader in child cancer policy and research. Could you give us a little background about, what got you into that and what set you on this path that you're on today?
Sure. So, as you stated, I am an attorney. Started practicing law in Washington, D.C. and Maryland in 99 at a law school. Mainly, I was a trial lawyer. My clients were insurance carriers, self insured corporations, small businesses, defending anything from property cases to I used to represent Amtrak and McDonald's, the arena that the Washington Capitals played in, real estate investment trusts. And I enjoyed what I did, and I enjoyed the business development aspect of it. Then, unfortunately, in April of 2008, my firstborn, who was 27 months old at the time, Alexis, was diagnosed with a terminal and inoperable brain tumor known as DIPG. It's fatal upon diagnosis. She was given 9 to 12 months to live with standard therapies. She survived for 33 months and died in January of 2011, 2 weeks shy of her fifth birthday. From that point, I tried to go back into my law firm that I helped co-found, but I had no passion for the practice. And so I had a number of fortuitous breaks that allowed me to leave the practice of law and leave my firm officially in September 2015. And I took over as the executive director of a different childhood cancer organization. And I also helped co-found a nonprofit childhood cancer research biotech out in Beaverton, Oregon, and had some other opportunities to sit on some grant review and clinical trial committees at NCI, did grant review at the Department of Defense, CDMRP, and have been involved with a number of other nonprofits along the way until co-founding Prep for Gold in December of 2021.
Thank you for that context and that background. Your journey sounds very personal, and your involvement with all of these wonderful nonprofits is fantastic. I know that you've worked with the Max Cure Foundation as well as the Alliance for Childhood Cancer. Um, and in those involvements with those nonprofits, we just talk a lot about, nonprofit leadership. How did those experience kind of influence your current leadership style and priorities with Prep for Gold?
Sure. Being involved with a number of different nonprofits and working with other nonprofit organizations since really 2009. Yeah, I've seen a lot of different efforts. I've seen a lot of different priorities from organizations, be it funding, research, basic science, drug discovery, drug development, family support, psychosocial care. It, I've seen the gamut and advocacy work as we know it in terms of legislative and policy work. And so, it's a difficult space. Any nonprofit exists in a difficult space because you're not acting like a for-profit company in many regards as you're trying to gain support from donors, from grant organizations, from the government. And so it's extremely challenging to move your mission forward. So Prep for Gold was shaped as a result of, number one, the pandemic and seeing so many organizations struggle in terms of supporting their mission, raising funds, being able to do what they had been doing. And in just stepping back and seeing, in my opinion and the opinion of other people, that the needle in childhood cancer hadn't really moved ahead in many, many years. There's a lot of great research. A lot of money is being spent in drug discovery, drug development, trying to find new targets in various forms of childhood cancers. But the reality is that for a lot of different forms of childhood cancers, the outcomes haven't changed in decades. The drugs that are being used haven't changed in decades. So we're putting all of this effort and energy and not wasting it, but we're putting it into traditional pathways. When you take a step back and you look at the landscape, we should be looking at how to prevent children from being diagnosed in the first place and looking at creating strategies to actualize prevention and preventative care and protections against the toxicities from the therapies, which are 30, 40, 50 years old. So that's really what shaped the mission and the vision of Prep for Gold, number one. And number two, again, as I said, in nonprofits, in disease communities and disease populations, there are so many organizations. A family that loses a child generally wants to do something to memorialize and honor that child. And there's so many foundations out there, and they're all doing great work. But with that said, in my view, after being involved in so many different organizations for so many years, we had to carve out a mission and a niche that was vastly different in order to, number one, create impact and also survive.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you bring up a good point. A lot of funds do go towards, more traditional uh, research. And when you mentioned not moving the needle in many years, no, that's a very eye-opening statement to make, and it's very true. There's a lot of truth to it. And so I do know that Prep for Gold does invest in some research, such as the CAR T trials. And so when it comes to funding some projects or contributing to projects, how does your team decide who's worthy of getting that getting the
Sure. So the CAR T funding was with a different organization, but when some of the projects that we funded have been focused on the reduction of toxicities to help alleviate things like peripheral neuropathy or to reduce toxic metals in the bloodstream of kids that are taking therapies that are metal based so that we can create better outcomes for those kids and for patients. So, up until this point, we have not operated with a scientific advisory council or a scientific advisory committee. I've been fortunate enough to get to meet so many different researchers and clinicians through my years that one of my, I guess, call it hobbies is researching and investigating what's out there, what's being funded, what's not being funded. We look for gaps because we're not an organization that can fund a $1 million clinical trial or fund $50,000 to complete basic scientific research to go to a paper that then can go to a clinical trial. So we have to steward our funds very carefully and look for opportunities where there isn't something that's being funded and try and provide funding to help bridge gaps that researchers are dealing with. It's really eye-opening to see what gets funded along the continuum of a research project. And there's points and times where a researcher will have a $10,000 gap for something as basic as purchasing cell lines for a study or funding an assay and doing cell cultures. Those are not sexy. They're not the CAR T therapy trials. They're not, repurposing a drug, but it's the foundational work needed to move the research forward. So that's
Mhm.
that's what we have looked for.
It seems like prevention can sometimes be harder to quote unquote sell than treatment breakthroughs. How do you communicate the importance of prevention to donors, policymakers, and the public?
You hit the nail on the head. You go to scientific meetings, you go to advocacy meetings, you participate on advocacy calls, and the word prevention is generally not even used. And it's not even thought of in the context of children getting cancer. And I've had the retort from even pediatric pediatric cancer clinicians that have said, how can you prevent pediatric cancer? Kids don't drink, they don't smoke. What are you going to do? And so initially, it's been educating people, educating other organizations, other advocates, researchers, clinicians. And that began with putting on the first childhood cancer prevention symposium in October of 2023 in Washington, D.C. And that was held over a day and a half. And I worked with Philip Lupo, who is now at Emory University, who's an epidemiologist and head of the Children's Oncology Group Epidemiology Committee. And we put together an agenda that included traditional oncologists, researchers, people from agencies, parents, advocates, survivors, and got them all in the same room to talk about childhood cancer prevention and what it meant, and 365-degree view of trying to prevent children from being diagnosed, trying to prevent further harms once diagnosed, and what we can do. And then we put on the second symposium down at Texas Children's this past February, sorry. And that was a 3-day symposium. And out of that, we have put together the Childhood Cancer Prevention Consortium, which is now bringing together organizations as funding partners, along with a scientific advisory council that's being tasked with creating, developing, and outlining a strategy for preventing childhood cancer in all of its forms and all of its various iterations.
That's fantastic. Yeah, congratulations on the symposium. That's wonderful. One thing we also talk about on the show is fundraising, as you know, changing of policy changing as well as fundraising. Obviously, very important in the nonprofit space. Wanted to talk about the Gold Friday campaign for a moment. You made a unique connection between consumer spending and pediatric cancer research and prevention. What inspired that idea, and how do you measure, success of that type of fundraising beyond just dollars raised?
Sure. So one of my board members came up with the idea, and you look at fundraising opportunities throughout the year, and you've got your traditional events, third party fundraisers, campaigns, Giving Tuesday, things like that, and it's a crowded market. Prep for Gold has an active board. I think there's 16 board members right now, but everybody has their own life. Everybody has their own jobs, families, health issues, and I'm only 50% of my time with Prep for Gold. So, and I'm the only one that is a compensated individual at Prep for Gold. So fundraising is ridiculously challenging. It would be very tough if I was full time, which I'd love to be, but unfortunately, uh, it's the chicken and egg situations. Gold Friday came about because one of our board members had the idea, and we put the campaign together, and you know we were fortunate enough to get a donation from Naturepedic, which is an organic mattress and bedding company out of Chagrin Falls, Ohio. Very motivated individual started that company to reduce toxic chemicals and eliminate them from bedding and from beds. And we tried to use that to raise awareness with other, social media channels to try and bring in donations that way. Um, was it successful? We didn't raise a ton of money, unfortunately. We'll likely try and roll the campaign out once more again this year and hopefully build on it. But it really requires an all hands on deck effort and a sustained effort to create the awareness, to gain the momentum, to make people aware of the campaign and to connect. And, a lot of these campaigns, they're hit or miss. They really are.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Yeah, it is a very crowded market, and finding ways to stand out in any way possible is always a best practice, it sounds like. Jonathan, a lot of our listeners are nonprofit leaders themselves, and some of them are, the nonprofits are at their infancy. Do you have any advice that you might offer to a founder of a nonprofit that's trying to pull together resources and hit the ground running with a new organization?
I think it's important to have a mission and a vision that's different, because if you're just trying to do the same thing the same way everybody else has done it, you're going to struggle unless you have organic support from your own network, either through a wide network or high net worth individuals. It's a challenge. Running a nonprofit is just like running any other business. The product is your mission, and you have to connect your mission with your network, and then you've got to figure out how to connect your mission outside of your network, and again, diversify your vision and what you're doing, and work with other organizations as well. I think it's important to understand our limitations, understand our challenges as a disease population, to not recreate or reinvent the wheel, to not duplicate funding. There's never enough money to go around. Never. And so to not look at the landscape and understand what's already being done and who's doing it and how you can help magnify those efforts is, I think it's a huge mistake.
Sure. That's a very good point. I mean, Prep for Gold obviously is doing something out of the box, thinking out of the box with prevention. And that's fantastic. How can our listeners best support the work of Prep for Gold?
Sure. So, first and foremost, get in touch with me. My email is all over the place and it's JAGIN at PREP, the number four, GOLD.org. So, JAGIN at prepforgold.org. Our website is under construction. We've been rebranding and one of the, again, catch 22s of running a nonprofit without administrative support and with board members that have their own jobs and lives is that it takes that much longer to put something together. So we've been working on a new website for some time. But with that said, reach out if you want to help, if you want to learn more. I'm always happy to jump on a call, to jump on an email, to respond. I'm passionate about what we do. I believe that we can, in fact, move a prevention mission ahead and that we can create prevention based care. And we're doing it. We're going to do it. The organizations that are involved in the consortium have been great partners, and we're seeking additional nonprofit partners to help make this happen. It has to be financially based because we have to be able to support researchers that are following along with this strategy that's being developed. So, but reach out.
Excellent. Jonathan, I want to thank you for your time, sharing your story and the work of your organization and allowing us to spotlight the great work that you're doing. And we wish the very best to you and your mission. Thank you again.
Well, thanks for having me, and I appreciate it and appreciate what you guys do.
Thank you.